The first thing Lena Cruz became aware of, even before the fog of unconsciousness fully lifted, was the pain. It was a sharp, insistent throb in her left knee, a hot flare that shot up her thigh and down her shin with every beat of her heart. The second thing she became aware of was the cold, gritty feel of a concrete floor against her cheek. She tried to move, and a gasp escaped her dry lips as the world swam back into focus. The gymnasium of the Naval Amphibious Base in Coronado was a cavernous space, filled with the echoes of grunts, the smack of flesh on vinyl, and the bark of commands. But for Lena, the sounds were muffled, as if she were underwater. She blinked, her vision clearing to see the worn rubber flooring just inches from her face. Above her, she could hear the raucous, jeering laughter of men. "What's the matter, Cruz? Tired already?" A voice boomed, thick with mockery. "Get up and crawl back to the kitchen, sweetheart," another voice joined in, closer this time. "You're in the way." The memory of the last few seconds slammed back into her. She hadn't fallen, she had been pushed, hard, a sharp, unexpected shove from behind as she'd moved through a cluster of men during a water break. She, a 28-year-old lieutenant junior grade, a physical therapist assigned to the Naval Special Warfare Center, had been fair game. She wasn't one of them. And she was a non-select, a support officer, a woman in a world of hyper-masculine, aspiring Navy SEALs. To men like these, she was an inconvenience, an anomaly, a target for their pent-up aggression and misplaced sense of superiority. For months, Lena had endured it. The whispers that stopped when she entered a room, the accidental bumps in the hallway, the jokes about her role being to tape ankles and hand out water. She had a master's degree in kinesiology. See, a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, she'd earned training alongside some of the toughest competitors in San Diego, and a deep, abiding passion for the human body's capacity for strength and resilience. But here, in this testosterone-fueled crucible, she was invisible. Worse, she was a punchline. The push had sent her sprawling. Her knee, already weakened from a childhood injury, had twisted beneath her as she hit the deck. And the sharp pop she'd felt was the sickening sound of her patella sliding out of its groove and then snapping back. It was dislocated, now screaming in agony, the joint already beginning to swell. "Bend the knee, punk!" The voice was right above her now, dripping with contempt. It was Petty Officer First Class Kellerman, a bull of a man, one of the senior candidates in the class. He was everything the SEALs looked for, physically dominant, aggressively confident, and utterly without empathy for anyone he deemed weak. He and his constant shadow, a man they called Mad Dog Morrison, stood over her, their massive frames blocking the light. "You want to play with the big boys? You gotta learn your place. Now bend the knee." The others in the immediate vicinity had stopped their exercises, forming a loose, expectant circle. The instructors were on the other side of the gym, focused on a different evolution. For these few minutes, the gym was a lawless arena, and Kellerman was the alpha. He wanted a show. He wanted to humiliate her, to break her spirit in front of everyone, to reinforce the natural order as he saw it. He reached down and gave her a rough shove on the shoulder, pushing her back down as she tried to rise. "I said bend the knee!" Lena looked up at him. She saw the cruel smirk playing on his lips. She saw the eager, hungry look in Morrison's eyes. She saw the other men, some smirking, some looking away in discomfort, and none willing to step in. In that single, crystalline moment, a lifetime of quiet endurance shattered. The years of proving herself, of smiling through the condescension, of working twice as hard to be seen as half as capable, it all coalesced into a cold, hard knot of fury in her gut. The pain in her knee was a distant hum compared to the sudden, clarifying silence in her mind. They weren't men. They were bullies. And she was done. She looked from Kellerman's face to his legs. They were thick, but powerful, planted wide apart for balance as he leaned over her. His right knee, encased in a soft knee brace, was locked. She remembered his file now, the one she'd reviewed for her therapy sessions. Kellerman with a history of patellar tendinitis. Morrison with a surgically repaired left ankle from a college football injury. She knew their bodies better than they did, and she knew exactly where to strike. Her movement wasn't a scramble or a desperate flail. It was a precise, an explosive execution of a technique she had drilled thousands of times. From her position on the ground, she used her good leg and her core to generate power. Her right hand shot out, not to push him away, but to grab the cuff of his cargo pants just above his boot. At the same time, her left leg, the injured one, screamed in protest as she used her heel to pivot her body. She pulled his leg toward her with all her strength, while driving the heel of her other foot directly into the side of his weight-bearing knee, the one with the tendinitis. The effect was immediate and devastating. It was a perfect textbook Ashigarami sweep, adapted for the concrete jungle. Kellerman's leg was ripped out from under him. His eyes went wide with shock, the smirk vanishing as his center of gravity shifted violently backward. He had no time to react, no time to catch himself. He crashed to the ground with a thunderous boom, the back of his head smacking against the hard rubber floor. A groan escaped him as he lay there, stunned and disoriented. The circle of men gasped, a collective intake of air. Before anyone could move, before Morrison could even process what had just happened to his friend, Lena was moving. The pain in her knee was afire, but she used it, funneling it into her focus. She didn't try to stand. She stayed low, and transitioning her weight in a fluid motion. Morrison, seeing his partner down, lunged for her, his hands reaching out to grab her and throw her aside. He was counting on size and brute force. Lena was counting on physics and anatomy. As Morrison's hands closed on her tactical vest, she didn't resist. Instead, she went with his momentum, falling backward and pulling him forward and down. As she fell, she brought her feet up, planting them on his hips. It was a Juji Gatame setup from the guard. Nay, but she had no intention of trying to submit him. Her goal was simpler, more primal. Using his own forward momentum and the powerful drive of her legs, she executed a perfect scissor sweep. But instead of sweeping him over, she used the apex of the motion to thrust her heels into his lower legs. There was a sickening crack, like a dry branch snapping in a forest. Morrison's forward charge was abruptly halted, and a sound came out of him that Lena had never heard a human make before. A high-pitched, animalistic shriek of pure agony. He crumpled, his left leg buckling at an unnatural angle just above the ankle. The surgical hardware that held his old break together had given way under the unexpected, concentrated force. Silence. Absolute, profound silence fell over that corner of the gym. It was so quiet you could hear the distant squeak of sneakers from the other side of the building. Adi Kellerman was on his back, groaning, clutching his head. Morrison was curled in a fetal position, whimpering, his hands hovering uselessly over his shattered ankle. And Lena Cruz was on the floor, breathing heavily, her knee throbbing, but her eyes clear and hard as diamonds. She pushed herself up slowly, using a weight bench for support, keeping all her weight off her injured leg. She stood there, a solitary figure, looking at the two broken men at her feet. She didn't gloat. She didn't speak. As she just stood there, the embodiment of controlled, righteous fury. The spell was broken by the pounding of boots. Two instructors, their faces masks of stern authority, pushed through the crowd. Senior Chief Reynolds, a man with a face like carved granite and 40 years of hard living in his eyes, stopped dead. He looked at Kellerman on the ground. He looked at Morrison, whose face was pale as a sheet. Then his gaze traveled to Lena, standing calmly by the bench, and the men in the circle began to babble, their words tumbling over each other. "She just attacked them, Senior Chief. Came out of nowhere, took them both down. It was insane, she snapped. They were just standing there and she—" Reynolds held up a hand and the chatter ceased instantly. His eyes, cold and assessing, remained fixed on Lena. "Lieutenant." "Report." Lena met his gaze without flinching. "Petty Officer Kellerman pushed me to the ground during the water break, resulting in a dislocated patella. He then ordered me to bend the knee and physically prevented me from rising. I defended myself. Petty Officer Morrison then attempted to engage me physically, and I defended myself." Her voice was level, professional, devoid of emotion. It was the report of an officer, not the hysterical excuse of a victim. Reynolds stared at her for a long, uncomfortable moment. He then looked at the men on the floor. "Kellerman, is this accurate?" Kellerman, still dazed. I looked from Reynolds to Lena. He saw the other men in the circle, the ones who had been laughing moments ago, now silent and avoiding his gaze. He saw the truth in their eyes. They wouldn't lie for him, not for this, not against her. I was just messing around, Senior Chief. She overreacted." Reynolds's jaw tightened. He looked at Morrison, who was now being attended to by another corpsman who had rushed over. The corpsman looked up, his face grim. "Left tib-fib fracture, Senior Chief." "I displaced. He's going to need surgery." Reynolds looked back at Lena. He saw the swelling in her knee the way she subtly favored it. He saw the scrapes on her palms, the grit on her cheek, and he saw the unshakable calm in her eyes. He didn't see a troublemaker. He saw a survivor. "Corpsman, get Lieutenant Cruz to medical. Now," he ordered. As Lena was helped away, he turned to the stunned class of SEAL candidates. His voice was a dangerous growl that carried to every corner of the silent gym. "The rest of you, drop and give me 200. And while you're down there, think about what you just witnessed. Think about what it means to mistake decency for weakness. Class dismissed at 1800, not a second before." The story didn't end there. It wasn't neatly tied up with a bow. Lena's knee required surgery and months of grueling rehabilitation. The investigation was thorough, but the video footage from the gym's security cameras, reviewed by the commanding officer, told a clear story. A shove, a fall, a physical threat from Kellerman, and a swift, precise, and proportional response from Lena. No charges were filed. Kellerman and Morrison were dropped from the SEAL training program. Their injuries, sustained during an act of hazing and assault, were deemed non-combat related, ending their naval careers. The hardest part came afterward. Then Lena expected whispers of crazy or dangerous. Instead, something else happened. The glances she got in the hallways were different. There was a new respect in them, a wariness, but also a flicker of something else. Admiration. Other female officers started seeking her out, thanking her quietly. Enlisted women she'd never met would nod to her in the PX. She had become an unwilling symbol. Months later, her knee healed, but forever marked by a thin silver scar, Lena was back at work. She was in her office reviewing files when there was a knock on her doorframe. She looked up to see a young seaman, his face earnest and young. He held a piece of paper in his hand. "Lieutenant Cruz, my name is Seaman Apprentice Miller. I'm reporting for duty with the BUD/S class starting next month." Lena nodded, her expression neutral. "Welcome, Miller. What can I do for you?" He stepped forward, his eyes dropping to her knee for a split second before meeting her gaze again. And he held out the piece of paper. It was a printout of an article from a Navy Times blog, a few paragraphs about an incident in Coronado, names redacted, about a physical therapist who stood her ground. The headline was simple: "Respect is not negotiable." "My mom sent this to me," Miller said, his voice quiet but steady. "She was worried about me coming here, said she'd heard stories about what it's like. She told me to find you if I could. She said to remember that the strongest person in the room isn't always the one doing the pushing. Sometimes it's the one who refuses to bend."